Lots of golfers get the hand moves wrong in the golf swings. Lots of golfers will roll the club in and then on the way down, move the hands too much with the right wrist, flapping at the golf ball, creating really poor contacts. What I want you to have from this video is the understanding of how the hand should move really throughout the golf swing with some couple of key points really. So what we're going to start with is the takeaway. So in the takeaway, what tends to happen is there's too much rotation. You'll see here the logo on my glove points away from the ball very, very quickly. The butt of the club points to the right of target almost instantly. That's generally the worst move we see in golf. And that's caused by too much rotation or independent arm movement and wrist movement as we start the golf swing. What we want to feel is it's a much more connected start to swing, so the arms and rib cage work a little bit more together. There's a slight bit of arm and forearm lead, but in general speaking, most people could probably feel it's all at the same time, even though I'm not a great lover of the word one-piece takeaway, because if we keep everything super connected, we can also work it inside from over-rotating too early. So what I'm after, in the key hand moves, is the angle we have here at the start with our lead wrist maintains itself for the initial part of the swing, and the only thing that would change would be the thumb would work up into that more what we call radial deviation. So the logo still points away from target, and we almost try and keep the butt of the club pointing at our body for as long as we can. I quite often talk about there being a light beam out the end of the golf club, and that light beam is going to point to our body, and that wrist would stay in that same state. The right wrist already has some extension to it, and that extension stays pretty much the same. And then as it starts to get the thumb working up, that extension would increase ever so slightly. So I'd want the wrist to stay pretty passive, apart from radial, for the first part of the golf swing. A fraction of change in the shape would get the golf club just moving more this way. So if we were very literal and the thumb went up, we might find the club go slightly outside the hands, which again is a winner generally speaking for most golfers. So if we found there was a tiny bit of this wrist losing its extension and working more towards flexion by a couple of degrees, then that club would come back more online. So that's the initial part of the swing. So focusing really on just the thumbs working up and no rotation, and the shaft still pointing to our body. The arms leading the rotation ever so slightly. At this stage here, we'd want to see the upper body doubling what the lower body's doing in terms of rotation. As we then go from here to the top, then I'd want to feel that the wrist then, lead wrist goes into flexion, so it gets pretty flat at the top. If it's slightly flexed or slightly cupped, I'm okay with that. On average, the best players in the world will have 10 degrees of what we call cupping at the top. DJ is minus 40 at the top. So I would say for you, if you're in that range of 10 degrees to kind of minus 20, that's pretty damn good and healthy. The key thing is, depending on how much your wrist has moved in that backswing area, then depends how much you'd want it to move on the way down. So in an ideal scenario, top of the swing, the right wrist is extended, left wrist is fairly flat. The left wrist wants to flex more on the way down, the right wrist wants to extend more on the way down as it comes all the way down through that downswing. Now the amount it goes into these positions depends on where you are in the backswing. I would generally look as a good measure to be about minus 20 flexed here, so bowed here at this position, and then a contact about minus 15. So the actual amount of flexion is slowly being released, if you like, as it gets to the golf ball. But the best players in the world at contact will have some form of flexion. When I measure most amateur golfers, the wrist is in extension at contact or fairly flat. So we want it definitely to be in those minus numbers to really create that correct compression and that ball on turf contact and that low point control. And if we take the wrist from being ever so slightly cupped to the top into that flex position on the way down and then going back into that extension piece as we go through the ball, that's a very dynamic way to move the wrist. So it's extended, flat, bowed, extended. And that action there, if you were going to throw something, would pretty much replicate how you would throw if you throw in just with your left hand to create the most amount of power and efficiency. So all we're after really is you to hold the golf club relatively well, maintain the wrist positions in terms of flapping this for the takeaway. Then if you like, flap it to the top, like you're revving a bike, flap it more on the way down, turn through and let it go, throw it towards. I think it's important to note you wouldn't want to throw it at the ball. We want to create our motion and flow to be through the ball as much as we possibly can. If we take a rod, stick it down the shaft, so in the takeaway, this would want to go across our body and then start to work up. That's the thumb up version. Then as we go to the top, this rod wants to feel like it goes a little higher and more out, and that gets you more into that flex state. Then on the way down, keeping it above the ball, and then in front of the ball, then it's kind of coming back towards us. So the rod can help give you a visual and give you some feedback on where your wrists are. And what I'd advise you do is do some swings in the garden, on the patio, with a rod down the shaft, and get some awareness of what your wrists are doing. Because quite often what you feel you're doing and what you're actually doing are two different things. You can obviously video yourself, but obviously you need to slow it down and look at it, in each different position. So that's a lot of words. So what I do is try and work on the piece that you need to work on the most. But if you were kind of just going, okay, I'm pretty good all around, but I could just be improved a touch, you would try and focus more on this side of things, the downswing side. Try and get your shaft to point above the ball, to the right of the ball on the way down, with your logo of your gloves starting to work more towards the ground. Then throw it towards target. That would be the advice. Sometimes you can work on little swings where you go, keep the glove at the same angle, thumb up, change direction. And that little kind of loopy change direction and controlling it with your wrist gives you the sensation of how we want the wrist to really move for the full swing. That kind of slight subtle shallowing, slight dynamic move of the wrists to create a really powerful impact. So as a drill, it's great to do those little shots, really focusing on what the wrists are doing, and then build that into your full swing. So have a go at those little exercises with a rod and those little kind of short swings to get the key hand moves in your golf swing to play better golf and really control that contact point and the ball flight.